Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you all. How's Devex World going? Yeah? If you know me, if you're around me, you might see me doing this a lot, and it looks like some kind of ritual greeting, but it is actually obsessively tapping my jacket to see if my phone is in there. I don't know if any of you are like that, but I think that is the reality of our lives now. But today in particular is World Day Against Child Labor. So it's worth thinking about that little addiction we have to our devices and what goes into them and how we can be responsible consumers of these devices we rely on so much. So we wanted to take a moment within the Devex World schedule to just focus on this topic. And we're so thankful to have an organization that's actually working very directly on the issue of mining and child labor, and that is Pact. Thank you for being a part of this, for making this session possible. Pact actually has been doing this since before it was kind of a buzzworthy topic. And so they are doing some pretty incredible work right at the front lines. And I want to welcome and ask Karen Hayes to please come out. She's the Vice President of Mines to Market at Pact to get us started. Karen.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to see you all today, and thank you for coming. I think it's superb that we are taking a moment to reflect on the question of child labor today. It's such a challenging and emotional and complex issue, but one that really does need our attention. And so I'm going to start today by doing something that people don't usually do in presentations like this and ask you to take out your mobile phone. As Raj says, these have become such a ubiquitous part of our life today. We have them constantly with us. We use them for so many different things. But yet, the minerals that make up our phone are challenging. There are a lot of development challenges associated with them. And one of them is child labor. The minerals that are in here come from mines that are worked by some of the poorest people in the world in incredibly tough situations. And for the last 14 years, Pact has been focusing on those folks and their lives and what we can do about it. I don't want to just lay the blame, though, at the place of mobile phones or mobile computers. There's a big change afoot at the moment, and that is in the innovation of things like electric cars, renewable energy, the kind of batteries, where these are little tiddly batteries, the kind of batteries we're moving towards today are substantial, massive batteries. The appetite for minerals today is voracious. We're demanding more and more minerals all the time, and they're coming from these very mines where people are struggling to survive. So when we first started considering this issue, Pact really looked at a whole range of different problems and challenges. And as I say, one of them was child labor. Now, why children work in mines is a very complex issue. Children work there because they have to, sometimes because they're forced to, sometimes just because that's what they do. It's what their parents did before. Children might work so that, they might do it after school, weekends, holidays. They might do it so that a younger sibling can actually go to school. They might do it because parents are sick. There are any number of reasons. So it's a big, complex, challenging issue that really requires an integrated approach that looks at a whole range of different factors and tries to address them in a holistic way. And one of the most important parts of that is actually hearing the stories of the children themselves, the stories of the miners, the families, their needs and perspectives. And I think that's come across very strongly in all of the discussions today. When I was looking at the work of the Kailash Foundation, I was very impressed at how they put children front and center as well. Children being able to express their own rights, their own needs. And that's something we've tried to do as well. I'm going to show you a very short video clip. It's from a video that we're launching today, in which some of the children that we've been working with tell their own story. So we'll have the clip now, and then I'll come back with a couple more remarks. Thank you.
Na nimesindikizwa na rafiki yangu Faustin, naye pia alikuwa paka humu maneno ya watoto nje ya Mngotsi.
Asante Joas. Na mie vile vile natumika mkariere na wazazi wangu wote. Wakati tunatumika kazi ya kubeba mchanga mkichwa. Kamiti ya alerte ikanisumburisha kutoka mkariere. Nikapata bahati ya kutoka na kumichezo mbalimbali. Na hapa penye niko nafunda informatiki. Na hii informatiki itanisaidia kwa maisha yangu ya kesho.
Habari njema Faustin. Nimeonana na mjomba yako naye pia akanikamilisha.
Aminei mwene buye ndanga senene. Hano hoyile abaya betu tueja mu formation. Tubafundisha mu kibunji, ku masomo, ku bihwilo, hano ibevuane tukankamika neja lelo mingilo eno yawine ke yakakoka yendelele tu.
Thank you. There's a much longer video. Please do go to our website to actually see it. It was produced in collaboration with our partners at Digital Development Communications. As I say, the important thing here is that we really wanted these children to be able to tell their own story. Through the program we've been working there, we've been training child journalists, and so they did all the interviews. They reached out to their cohort, their families, their friends, parents, to tell their story and their perspective. So I'm going to leave you with just two thoughts, if I may, because I know you're anxious to hear the panel. The first is, 8 years ago, the question of mobile phones was very much in our mind as well. All the discourse was about blood in your mobile phone, about conflict minerals, about the fact that mobile phones were financing conflict in Central Africa. And this was seen as a huge, complex, challenging problem. And indeed it was a huge problem. But over the last 8 years, we've worked very hard to actually demilitarize the mines, to take the guns out of the mines, to stop the human rights abuses. And after that, with the huge effort that was made by consumers and companies, by governments, by NGOs, by partners around the world, I can actually tell you that the tin and tantalum mines of Central Africa are now demilitarized. So that really tricky question that we said was so difficult, we're making really good progress on that. And that is what we have to take to the question of child labor. We need a movement. We need concerted action so that none of the children that you've seen in this video, or any children, have to depend on mining for their living. So thank you, and with that, I shall hand back over to Raj for the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. So I know everybody here knows Malala Yousafzai, but maybe fewer people are familiar with Kailash Satyarthi. You all probably also know films like The Post, Spotlight, some other big blockbusters like Syriana, maybe Waiting for Superman, but maybe are not as familiar with the studio behind all those movies, Participant Media. What you're going to learn about today is Participant Media's new film, Kailash. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Anjali Kochar, the executive director of the Kailash Satyarthi Foundation here in the US, Sarah Anthony, the producer of the film you just saw, and Holly Gordon, the chief impact officer of Participant Media.
Thank you.
First of all, how about a round of applause for this group? Congratulations. What an effort. What an achievement.
She made the movie.
I know, I'm looking at you.
With other people, thank you.
Okay, maybe we can start there. How did you make this movie? I mean, this is not an easy environment in which to operate. You've got a lot of mafias and criminal groups, and how did you get in there with these cameras? How did you show this?
Yeah, that part was actually really quite tricky. From a producing standpoint, logistically, obviously, you're like, okay, we're going to send a team of people into a place where people have been attacked and killed in the past. That's a little nerve-wracking. And there was one, well, you haven't seen the film, but there was one particular neighborhood that was full of butchers, and all the
great
locals,
start.
Yeah, all the locals warned us that they were known to throw their knives and drop knives from overhead. So I was like, okay, how am I going to protect the crew? And we were talking about maybe wearing helmets and stuff, and Kailash said, if you dress for battle, you'll provoke an aggressive response. And he told us that you go in with a smile and an open heart, and that fear is contagious, but courage is also contagious. So we went in.
Wow, incredible. How has he survived so long doing this kind of work? Tell us what his life and story is like.
Yeah, he's had many bones in his body broken. He's gone on a hunger strike. He's sacrificed literally his own life, but he really believes that his life is not worth, that one person's life is not worth much, and that it's more important to do something that helps save millions of people. But also they've done really great work with the legal system and with the police in India, and so now I never really felt scared. Like, we never really felt that scared because we had so much protection going with us. And so I think it was much, much harder when he first started. And it's not as hard now, but it's still, an activist was kidnapped a few months ago. It's still quite dangerous, but they're just incredibly brave. His son says in the film that they believe that sacrifice is the foundation of change.
Anjali, maybe you can tell us more about the issue that Kailash and your foundation work on. What's the scale of the issue of child labor in India and globally? What is the problem we're challenged with?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having us, and thank you all for coming. I can't really see anybody, but I know you're out there. So, you know, Kailash started this work back in 1980 when in India this was not something that was talked about. It wasn't something that organizations existed to do the work of. And just kind of taking us back to the global, the World Day Against Child Labor, you know, back in 1998, we actually did a global march against child labor that resulted in an ILO Convention 182. And at that point, the scale of the issue, we were looking at numbers around 260 million children that were child laborers. And since then, as of this past September of 2017, we're now down to 152 million. So huge progress has been made. And that has really been coupled with higher enrollment rates for out-of-school primary-aged children. And so we see a lot of this cross-section between child labor and bringing down the numbers, but then also having children in school in meaningful, quality, inclusive education. But clearly we have more work to do. The UN SDGs have a target of total elimination of child labor by 2025. So. But Kailash and I think many others are right there. They're very hopeful, and they know that they will see that day when every child will be in school and not working.
Holly, this connection with education brings me to you because you co-founded Girl Rising, which is about girls' education. I think everybody knows that. Tell us about what you, as somebody who makes impact films, hopes to get out of a film like Kailash. What is the new agenda or the movement you're trying to create out of this film?
Honestly, it's fun to do panels like this because I would build right off what Anjali said, which is that we've seen progress. And one of the things that you look for when you're tackling what could be called a social issue film is a gap between awareness and reality. So for us, a participant, the fact that there are still 147 million kids manufacturing the very things that you're wearing. I can't tell you whether or not my trousers are child labor free. I can't tell you if my coffee was picked by a child. So it touches me every day, and yet I had no idea that there's, you know, it's a problem of such scale. So a gap between what's real and what people know about. And secondarily, the opportunity to tell a great story. The film that Sarah and Derek and Davis Guggenheim, who made An Inconvenient Truth, Waiting for Superman, he named me Malala, so someone who really comes from a background of taking important stories and making them into entertaining content. The skills that he brings to this story is how do you make it like a thriller and bake in the issues that we all care so much about, the progress that we all want to make. And then the third thing, if I can't, I've lost count, but hopefully it's the third thing. The third thing is to build off what Anjali was saying, which is momentum, right? Is there an appetite in the world, and are we at a moment in history where change can be accelerated? Because the beauty of a film, and the reason that coming to Devex is an important place for us to be with this film, is that the beauty of film is that it travels through networks. It's like an electric current. It is not held back by borders or time zones. And so we can, our goal is to put this film into networks of advocates who are mission aligned so that those advocates can use the film to accelerate progress in their own communities, whether that be in Bangladesh or Bismarck, North Dakota, right? And so we had all of that, all of those elements for this film. And so it's a great heart-thumping thriller. You go along on these very dangerous raids. You really get to know Kailash and his depth of compassion and selflessness, which I agree is the beginning of leadership. And you come away feeling as though, well, this is a problem we can solve, and with technology and blockchain, and also with the willingness of big multinational corporations are really interested in solving this challenge, right? There's really a moment in time where sustainability means who's making your stuff. It doesn't just mean whether or not you're green. So it's an exciting project for us.
Let's get into that issue of how you solve it. So you talked about not knowing where your clothes come from or your products you buy. Where are we on that trajectory? Maybe I can go to the two of you, to Anjali and to Sarah, on getting, is this a basic supply chain problem that we have to kind of push big companies to care? Is it about pushing consumers? What's the entry point?
Well, I'll just speak about the film for a minute. One of the storylines we track is the hunt for a missing child. And in the process of doing that, we'd had hidden cameras go into a factory, and they gave us a sample which had a major brand label on it. And part of the issue for Kailash and his team, it's so difficult to track the supply chain because often brands will label their products in other countries so that if they're raided, they're not detected. So it's just very, very complex.
So, I mean, I would actually answer that question by saying it's everybody.
Yeah,
it's not only companies, it's not only consumers, but we actually also have to ensure that we have policymakers and laws and legal systems and training for those who are implementing the laws and enforcing them. We need we need to share the stories of what happens to these children with people in their villages, because they also don't know. And so it really is starting at the very grassroots level and building all the way up to, governments and leaders of nations and all of us in the middle, because we all can be more conscientious consumers.
Can we be? Like, what should we be doing differently as a consumer today?
I was going to say, think about makeup, and usually you don't find a makeup product now that doesn't say free of animal testing. Right. Like,
where you have a huge makeup brand like Beauty Counter that's core to its a commitment to the consumer.
Yeah, so why couldn't we have free of child labor? Like, why couldn't...
And do you feel it's so widespread in the supply chain that we would need to have that on every product, practically, free of child labor? Can you envision that day when you're buying that shirt and it has to have that label, because if it doesn't, you really don't know?
I can imagine it. And the challenge that we have, so just again, building off what Anjali was saying, is that you can sit back and think, oh, well, then it's so overwhelming. If it's all those people, it's overwhelming. But we actually live in a time, again, because of technology and the interconnectedness of all of us around the world and the ways that ideas can fly, we live in a time where rapid acceleration of this kind of societally demanded change is possible. And so you can go with a piece of content and a message from the tiniest village in India all the way up to the halls of power at the UN. So I feel super optimistic, and it is through that sort of coordinated systemic leverage that you start to move change. And as an individual, we all have access to social media. Companies are listening on social media, literally asking the question, are your products child labor free? Can you answer that?
And
right?
You feel like right now many companies just can't answer that. They don't really know.
They can't. And it's not because they don't want to, but they have a lot of priorities. And it's a tough world out there to run a business, and those are not excuses; those are explanations. And the supply chains are diverse and can be super far away from the market, as we all know. And so it's a level of due diligence that has to be de rigueur. I like to think that this is actually, I know it's a supply chain transparency company, so I keep touching my shirt, but it's not. I wore it specially. But my pants, if there was a poisoned thread in my trousers, you can bet the company would figure out who manufactured it, right? So when there's a disaster, there's suddenly supply chain understanding. It's just in the day-to-day manufacturing that it doesn't rise to the top of our priority list.
Kailash says if we can label a banana organic.
There you go, right? We're labeling our bananas organic, but not our clothes child labor free.
And beyond the economic argument, is there a cultural component here too? Like, I know there's a connection with child marriage and child labor. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit. And how do you change perspectives about this issue beyond just changing the economic side?
Yeah, a few of the kids, so the film starts with a raid, and then we follow the rehabilitation of a few kids as one of the storylines. And several of them are boys who went to work because they wanted to raise the money to pay for their sister's wedding. So it is interconnected.
Yeah. I mean, I think, going back to actually what's happening within families and what's happening within villages or in even in urban settings, it is a lot of awareness raising. It's really talking to parents about the value of education, because even that exists at higher socioeconomic levels, but at much lower levels, it is much more like, okay, well, this is, somebody's come into our village and has said, I can provide your child with a better life. Mm-hmm. And so a parent believes that without understanding really what all that means.
But even the kids believe it. Frankly, day 2 in one of these villages, I said to Derek, the director, I was like, I can understand how this happens. Like, there's no running water, there's no electricity, there's nothing to do. A well-dressed stranger comes in and says, I'll take you to the big city, I'll give you a job, here's a piece of chocolate, here's some money for your family. Like, it makes perfect sense to me that somebody would go without the knowledge of what's going to happen to them.
Yep.
It's funny because it's like deja vu all over again, because it's so related to the work that I have done on Girl Rising, which is we used to talk about raising the value of the girl within the context of her community, and this is very similar, which is raising the value of an education. Right. And the answer for Girl Rising is educate girls, change the world. Well, the answer for the world is education. And so, and we always used to come at it from an economic perspective, and there's an economic perspective to this one, because if you're, if a child is doing the job, then a grown-up is missing out on that income. And so, there are decisions of poverty which this audience knows very, very well. These are well-meaning parents, for the large part, who are trying to do the best thing they can. They're in desperate circumstances. But the investment in education is the investment that over generations, transforms communities. So it is that awareness raising, and this is a scary. When this airs around the world, which it will, this and in translation and reaches, because of technology, the most rural places in the world. This is a scary story for people to watch. And it will help to change their understanding, because that's what content can do. It can make personal an issue which you didn't think was your own.
And talk about the networks that benefit from child labor today, and what kind of a fight they might put up or are putting up against this kind of change.
Well, just on a very practical or basic level, the factory owners themselves, they fight back, in the
physically.
moment. Yeah,
right.
Physically.
Yeah.
It's cheaper. It's free labor. So
it cycles up to corruption, right? So it starts with running a corrupt business in order to, beat your competitors, and then there's, you see it in the film, but there's corruption within the police force. Kailash can always know who to trust, and so that kind of, we'll just do this on the margins and no one will find out, and we'll be able to manage. It's a global challenge that we face. But corruption dies in transparency, and so that's where we have to put we know the challenges. So what are the solutions? Well, the solutions are more transparency, and how can we lean into technology to help us have that transparency and have it be a non-negotiable?
And is this story pretty similar globally? Is this an India story? How do you see it, Anjali?
I think it's a global story. This child labor is happening in every city around the world, in every country around the world. There are young people who are being trafficked all around the world, older people as well. So this, I think it's like what Holly was just talking about. I think what the movie does so beautifully is that it allows us to put a face on the topic without getting so overwhelmed and really totally getting paralyzed, because we don't actually know then what to do when we think about it. And so this says, this gives us that moment in time to say, okay, so I see this as an India story, but I think I read something in the paper about something like this happening in my town or in the next city, and I wonder what is going on here. And so it allows you to take that global issue and really translate it and transform it into a very local and personal story, so that you can transform your concern into action.
Let's talk about that, how film can actually transform concern into action. You've been working on this for a long time. Participant media has been in this business for a long time. One of the themes at Devex World is about results and the new kind of results revolution and how people are pushing for impact. It's really tough to measure the impact of something like this, which took an enormous amount of energy. Presumably it was pretty expensive. You're going to try to push it out there and promote it. How do you see that? How does impact film fit into the broader development agenda?
So measuring the power of narrative is always an enormous challenge. And I would hazard to say that it's almost impossible. The world is not, ask a scientist, whether or not you can measure something you do in the world without a sort of controlled laboratory environment with any degree of scientific certainty, and they're going to say no. And so as somebody who fundamentally believes in the impact of film, I'm constantly challenged by this idea of, can I control the world? How can I control where the film goes and then prove this sort of scientific theory? And recently I've been using a laundry analogy, which is there's a pile of dirty clothes and you put them into the washer and they come out, you fold them, they smell cleaner and they look better, versus there's a pile of clothes of different kinds of substance and you put them into the laundry machine with a very particular pH balance for a particular amount of time, you get my point, and you come out and you can then test which clothes are cleaner and which are not. Well, we do more of the former than we do the latter. Now, that said, that's not to run from the desire or focus on measuring our impact.
Even your job suggests that desire,
that's
right?
100%.
You're the chief impact officer
that's
for this
right.
media.
So I'm not letting myself off the hook. But what I'm trying to do with each of our upcoming campaigns is to identify what we can what we can craft some structure around, what goalposts we can set for ourselves, and then as anyone who knows who runs a business knows, but if you create goalposts and measurable milestones, well then you resource those goalposts and milestones. And so we are about to be able to share the name of a distributor with all of you in the next few days, I hope. And then we'll be working with the distributor together. We have a draft of what we are proposing, but together with them, decide what we're going to measure. and then what we're going to leave to what we believe, which is that when you unleash a piece of content like this to the world and you allow communities to take hold of it and bring it into their world and use it for their outcomes, your outcomes will be much better scaled than if you're just going to do the things that you can control. So the beauty of what I do and what we do at Participant is that we want to relinquish control. We want to put this gift into the world and say, show us what you can do. And if I'm gonna tell you what to do, you're gonna be far less likely to do the thing that's relevant to your community than if I say, here it is, here's some parameters, go use it, imagine, galvanize your community and solve the challenges that make sense for your community. And so we'll end up with a zoom out kind of impact measurement narrative, and then hopefully, if I keep my job, we can talk in a year or so, we'll have some zoom in, some sort of some things where we've tried to control for other factors and actually live up to a theory of change with some kind of confidence.
You know, impact film is something I have heard a lot about. I hear people talking about. I'm sure many people here feel the same way. But I don't know that broadly it's a well-known concept that there's film out there to make impact.
Well, we're leading the way, Raj.
Yeah, well,
Watch this space.
I'm just curious to get your take on this, Sarah, because as a producer, as a filmmaker yourself, is this the kind of thing among filmmakers you can say, I'm into impact film, people sort of get what that means now? Where are we in the arc of this?
I think so. And I mean, anywhere you go in the world, you go into the slums of Bangkok, whatever, you see people watching TV. So film, I think, really is the most powerful medium we have to try and influence change. And just like anecdotally, at Sundance, we screened the film. There was an 8-year-old in the audience in the front row. And when it came time for the Q&A, he was like, please take Michael. And he said, okay, I know that film festivals, the circuit takes a long time. He was obviously very
wow, that's quite an 8-year-old.
Film world. But he said, I know it takes a long time, but I think it's really important that you get this film into schools right away because I think every kid needs to see this. And well, you can't measure
measure that.
But
by the way, how did it do at Sundance?
It won the grand jury prize.
Not too shabby.
And I would say there are different kinds of impact film, and there's different sort of appetite for impact film. This is a really, it's an amazing, entertaining experience, and its message is very close to the top, right? There's a whole other kind. We made The Post. How many of you saw The Post this spring? Good audience for that one. So The Post is a more gentle impact film, really looking at the importance of the First Amendment and of the role of journalists to hold our government accountable. And that, to me, is as important a kind of message. Certainly not going to try to measure the impact of The Post. It's a much more sort of subtle cultural moment that, you can be lucky or you can be smart, and sometimes, you don't know where you land, but it was an important film at this moment in time. We just made RBG, which I hope many of you have seen as well, which also is a very relevant film at this moment in time, and has a completely different kind of impact feel to it, which is really a celebration of one woman's leadership and a recommitment to a set of values for which she stands. So. Anyway, in a world in which no change ever starts without a story, my bets are on stories as one of the least, one of the most underutilized tool of global development today. And so we are so excited about the power of stories in the hands of community members to drive change at scale.
I'm curious about the story behind this film and how it happened, because I'm wondering, people in the audience, people watching this who are running development organizations, and they're thinking, I'd love to get a film like this about my issue. How do I get that, How does it actually work? Like, how do you go from the typical approach that many NGOs and aid agencies have around kind of communications, marketing, to filmmaking, which is a very different level of discipline and practice? How did you get there? Maybe Anjali, do you want to tell the backstory?
Well, I think really Sarah should tell
Please.
this since it started.
It's Davis Guggenheim was making the Malala film, and he was at the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony when Kailash and Malala won, all the attention was focused on Malala, and he just saw this humble, quiet man sort of walking around. He was like,
Like a
"Who
good
is-
journalist. He's like, who's that?
Who is that?" And then you hear his story, and he took it to Participant Media, and it was like, of course we're going to make that movie. And for me, I'd been in India 10 years before and seen child labor, and had just seen An Inconvenient Truth, like completely coincidentally, and thought, oh, we need to make a movie about An Inconvenient Truth for child labor. And then it took 10 years, but I wasn't, yeah. When I got the call from Davis and Derek, it was like, yes, please.
And I would just add that, for anyone who's tried to make content, it is making great content, making entertaining content out of something that is an issue. First of all, never start with the issue. You have to start with story always. And if you start with issue, you will probably not get your value back in terms of how that issue travels, because what you need to travel is the story, not the issue. The story is the exoskeleton, and the issue is the guts.
That made sense.
Yeah, good. Never said that one before. But it's worth the investment, and that there are people who do this. It is their expertise. It is their specialty. Davis being one of them. It's hard,
Right.
and it's expensive. But if you can get that right, and you can build a team, and if anyone's truly interested in doing it, call me up and I'll give you the detailed way of doing it. But it's about finding the right filmmakers. It's about, on the narrative side, a script that really works, and on the documentary side, what's the story
People.
arc going to be? What's that?
Who are the people?
Who are the people? Who are the characters? The storyboard at Concordia Studios is so interesting because it, you track all the different storylines, and they had to change it 6 or 7 different times because way number 1 was flat. Right. Way number 2 left some, unanswered questions. Way number 3. So it's really, it's tough. And the thing that is beguiling is this idea that, well, everyone has a cell phone, so everyone can shoot something, everyone can tell a story, and to a degree that is true, and that's amazing. And then to another degree, if you want to truly achieve scale, then usually you're going to have to invest in some expertise behind it.
So what does that mean, Sarah, for you and for filmmakers like you to have a participant media in the world?
Oh, it's the best thing ever. Sorry. It's just the idea that there's a company dedicated, they have like a double bottom line. It has to be a good film, but it also has to have impact. It's just
And this is
amazing.
really from Jeff Skoll, who's the founder of Participant, who was the co-founder of eBay, and he's also the benefactor behind the Skoll World Forum, which is really convenes leaders who are social entrepreneurs who are leading change around the world, which is again another piece to the filmmaking puzzle. Is actually watching films together is far more powerful than watching it alone, in terms of driving change. But Jeff's vision was for Participant was this double bottom line, was entertainment that can inspire change. And he fundamentally believes in the ability of individuals, everyday citizens, and Kailash would argue that he's an everyday citizen. The everyday citizen's power to lead change. And that story can unleash that thing inside that makes you that changes the course of your life in a way that few other mediums can. And so, Participant's almost 15 years old. Next year's our 15th anniversary. So Jeff had this idea before the internet, before content could fly the way it does today. And I gotta say, hats off, prescient, right?
It's an incredible list of films that the studio's been behind.
Yeah.
But are both of those bottom lines equally tough, or is the business just as hard as it is to create impact? I mean,
aren't there jokes about only going to the film business if you're crazy? I don't know, but
Yeah,
it's
hard no matter what
it's
you
a
make.
hard no matter what. But I would also say that many of our jobs are hard. So,
well, I ask that in part because I wonder: is there an industry around impact film being built beyond Participant?
It's a great question, Raj. I hope so.
I think in general in the world right now, it used to be do good or do business, and now it's do good business.
Yeah.
And we make more money.
Yeah,
Doing good.
I see Wonder Woman as an impact film. I see Black Panther as an impact film. Any film that can challenge everyday citizens around the narrative of our lives. We made A Fantastic Woman, which won the Best Foreign Academy Award for a foreign film, and that really that was a love story, and the twist on the love story was that the lead character was a trans woman. So just making that film alone was sort of a progressive step, if you will. But I hope so. You know, I'm evangelizing to philanthropists and foundations to really get in the business of this kind of having this as being a part of their impact portfolio. So I'm hoping it's growing, and if you want to help, call me up.
So in the next couple of minutes that we have, where do we go from here with the film? So people who are here watching this who think, I want to get involved with Kailash, I want to help use this for my own organization's work to tell the story that I need to tell about how I'm working in this field, what do they do?
Well, Raj, I'm so glad you asked. I wasn't joking when I said we make this film for you, for leaders who are working in the field of development, for leaders who are addressing these kinds of problems, are interested in solving global challenges every single day, and that our hope is that you will, follow along over the next few months and engage in your own community, whether that be at work, at home, abroad, here in the United States, around this film at the appropriate time. So we are probably in the next week or so going to announce the distributor for this film. And if you would like to join our communication pool so that we can talk to you and you can talk back to us and help us build this, what we're hoping will be a global day of action around this film, please text 40649. 40649, and that will lead you through a prompt where you give us your name and your email and where you live so that we can have that information, and then you will be the first to know when we sign the distribution deal. And then we hope, number one, I'd love to hear from you, and what we hope is that we will, add momentum to this issue around informing consumers demanding child labor-free goods, engaging with companies and their compliance officers, and engaging in the halls of government to encourage policy leaders to prioritize this issue across their governments. But we need your help.
And please.
Sorry, can I just add to that?
Yeah.
That I think that we hope all of you will text, but when you do send that text, can you please type in the word free?
Oh, yes, I
Because
forgot.
that's really what this is about at the end of the day. It is about every child being free to be a child. Sorry, just
Yes,
wanted
that's
to
what you
add
put in
that
the messaging part, is free. Free, safe, and educated.
I remember in An Inconvenient Truth when that came out, and being in theaters and people standing up and applauding it, and the kind of movement that created around climate. And I'm really hopeful this movie's going to do the same thing.
Raj, thank you.
Thank you for
so
being
much
here. Thank you
having
for
us.
premiering it here. It's very exciting to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.